Yes, of course, the sort of the mother of all of the other passions. Passions sometimes in the when you read spiritual literature are divided into groups, into categories, and the fathers will point out that one releases another one, and pride, of course, is sort of the pin that seems to hold so many of them together. Passions, that is. So, in the same way that humility is the gateway to the other virtues, pride is the coordinator of all of the passions. If we have pride, it's releasing a whole boatload of passions inside. Just terrible. It fires everything. It fires every single other passion, energizes it. So even the passions that might be weak because they're worn down through prayer or something else will become energized through pride. When they're weak, they're dying off. Pride just pumps that much more fuel back into it so that it resurfaces all the time. When the pride is put down, in other words, when humility is acquired, because you can never put down pride without acquiring humility. You acquire humility, it pushes pride out. It takes its space, so to speak. Not that we can be spatial about it in a literal sense, but inside, as we acquire humility, it pushes out the pride. Once the pride is being pushed out, it's not energizing the other passions. It's like removing the fuel from a fleet of vehicles. The vehicles may still be there, but they become powerless. They're no longer mobile. That's what happens to the other passions that are fueled by pride. They cease to be mobile, and they can then die off. Because when they're not mobile, then you're not responding to them, you're not practicing them. If you don't practice or respond to the passions, they begin to wither. You know, a passion that is never engaged doesn't remain. If you have a passion and you keep not responding to it, it just gradually fades away. But if it's fueled, of course, you're going to always be driven by it. And we are very driven people for many reasons in our society, you know, that we're doing a lot, that a lot is demanded of us, that there's a high degree of complexity, that we're busy, that we don't get enough sleep, so on and so forth. But we're also very driven by our passions. And unfortunately, what's the reality of it? Every society has always driven passions, but ours delights in driving passions, delights in it. It's what I've mentioned to you before. I see a bus going by, an advertisement for a new vehicle, 2 words on the advertisement: pure lust. That's it. Well, at least nobody's hiding what we're doing. We're firing passions to drive the economy, I guess. But it's obvious. In many other ways, it's much more subtle. But you see, if you want to manipulate someone, and of course, we know advertising is about psychological manipulation, which is therefore manipulation of the inner life of a person. That's why it's spiritually violent in many respects. Advertising is spiritually violent. If you want to manipulate a person to get a person to do something against his will, if you can fire the passions, you can do it. Because the person loses the sense of self and just does it. So pride plays that very, very important role of being a passion in itself, but also fueling the passions across the board at the same time. It has a double activity as far as that is concerned. And it has to be put down prayerfully through receiving Holy Communion and, of course, through acquiring humility. We have to acquire the real thing to get rid of the false thing. You don't just get rid of the false thing. If you acquire humility, pride will go. They don't coexist very well. Actually, pride is buried in places where we would least expect to find it. Despair. Who would think to look for pride there? Really? Be the last place you think you look for pride would be despair. And again, I'm not talking about depression, clinical depression, this is different. There can sometimes be a connection, but this is different. So please, we'll make sure we're talking about the same thing. But despair, if we're in the depths of despair, spiritually speaking, we have become proud enough to think that God is not capable to act. And that's an amazing kind of pride. That's huge. Who are we to say God can't act? Who are we? What does it take to say that? No, you can't do anything. You can tell me, no, you can't do anything. You're probably right. Tell God you can't do anything? His creation tells him you can't do anything? He who made us out of nothing, you can't solve my problems. No, he can't. He just makes creation out of nothing. That's all. What is it that comes into a mind to think that the God who creates from absolute nothing, the God who was unknown to the Greeks because they couldn't conceive of absolute nothing, in that sense unknown, that God who brings being out of nothing and sustains it can't handle our problems? What's the state? Pride. You can't do it. I know. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're created. You're finite. You don't know. I don't know. We don't know. We can't say that. And if we say it, it's pride. In the midst of despair, where you wouldn't, as I said initially, exactly go looking for pride. Of course, there can be pride in the other places as well, in sloth and lust of power and idle talk, certainly. But there's a very specific place in despair which makes it really deadly. And it's very hard sometimes for people who are in that passion to get over it because it is so beautifully, or diabolically, I should say, disguised. The person who is in that kind of despair insists that he or she has far more humility than everybody else. Can you hear it? There it is. There's the passion. Nobody else can possibly know my suffering. Really? Really? Literally? Come on. When we're suffering, we feel these things. That can be because we've been wounded. Of course it can, and the wound needs to be healed. I'm very sensitive to that side of it. But when we get really entrenched, then we fire up the passion. Nobody else can be at that point. Nobody else understands that pain. God can't do anything about it. I can go to confession, it's not going to change anything. Even if I pray, it's going to be the same. I can go to church, it's useless. The church can't do anything. You hear all the stuff coming out. Wow. I should think that I could make such pronouncements as a human being. Who do I think I am? The person's forgotten. I'm created. I'm finite. I'm mortal. I'm sinful. I can't say these things. That reflects humility, not in the sense of putting oneself down, but in the sense of knowing who one is. So it's there, all right. St. Ephraim had the prayer well conceived so that the pride is there. He's picked 4 of one and 4 of the other. And we see, their relationships in as much as one represents the reversal or the cure of the other.